everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here, and look who is alongside me. You can't keep Manny Hill away for very long. Manny Hill co-hosting this evening. I have made up a fake Vikings schedule for Manny to pick for later because we got a ton of demands after the Vikings made all these additions. Manny's got to get on here, and he's got to pick the win-losses, even if we don't have a real schedule yet. But Manny, we got to start in a place that I don't really want to start, but I have to because it won't go away. And then we'll work our way into your takes on the Vikings and how much they made themselves better, where they still need to go. I am currently working on a depth chart and the biggest questions and so forth, which I'll screen share and pull up and we could talk about it. But let's just begin with reports from Diana Rossini and Mike Silver of The Athletic that Aaron Rodgers is intrigued, interested, and so forth about the Vikings. And just to paraphrase, that the Vikings are thinking about it or interested in talking about it or whatever kind of language you want to use, which is not that definitive. And then Adam Schefter does a report on ESPN Radio where he says much more definitively, JJ McCarthy is the Vikings guy, that Aaron Rodgers needs to look elsewhere. My read of the room here, Manny, is that Aaron Rodgers would really love to be a Minnesota Viking. I do not blame him. Justin Jefferson is extremely good at football. They've added talent. They can win this year. But I think if you're the Vikings, I cannot make this work in my brain for why you would want to do this. What would your justification be? Because if they did not feel that McCarthy was ready, they would have just worked harder to convince Sam Darnold to stay around. And instead, they, are going to go out and get someone who's way older, who just ripped another organization to shreds, who hasn't been a good quarterback in the NFL since 2022. Actually, no, I'm sorry. 2021 is really the last time he was good. It just doesn't really click of why they would go so far deviating from their plan from day one, even from the time they got here, to then just sign a deal with the devil and go with Aaron Rodgers.
And I wonder if, with all the free agent signings the Vikings have made over the last couple of days, if that has got people thinking, well, went and got Jonathan Allen, they went and got Ryan Kelly, they went and got all these, they filled all these needs that everybody has said that they've had. Well, they've got to be going all in. I mean, look at the two defensive tackles that they signed. These guys are, right in the middle of their careers. They're in their 30s. They're veterans. This team's trying to win right now. What better way to try to win than going and getting Aaron Rodgers off the free agent market? And I just keep going back to Coller. Why would anyone take the Vikings out of the equation for a second, or not just include them? Why would anybody want to deal with whatever headache that Aaron Rodgers is going to bring to the table right now? I mean, people are going to talk about, I think the Steelers have been mentioned, the Giants have been mentioned, all these other teams that need quarterbacks. I look at each one of those teams and I think, why would anybody want to deal with everything that comes with having Aaron Rodgers on your roster right now? And in addition to the fact that he's 41 years old, he's going to turn 42 next season. You just kind of wonder how much he has left in the tank. He played the full season with the Jets, but they weren't a very good team. Were they 5-12, 6-11, something like that? They were not a very good team with him playing all 17 games. So I, at this point, if you're the Vikings and you've got all of this invested into your young quarterback, that you let Sam Darnold go, so you have indicated that you're moving forward now with JJ McCarthy, and you are building and constructing this roster around JJ McCarthy having success. I don't know why you would want to pivot and just suddenly bring Aaron Rodgers in, because you think that gives you a better chance to compete for a championship, maybe. And I'm not entirely sure Aaron Rodgers at this stage of his career actually really improves those odds by that much.
I Shot You 99 says, well, what if JJ McCarthy isn't ready? But that's what I mean about the Sam Darnold thing, is
Right.
that it doesn't appear from Sam Darnold's contract, which was a fine contract with Seattle, but it doesn't seem like from his contract that the Vikings were saying, no, Sam, we can't have you leave. We have to absolutely have you come back and return. And I think that if they begged, and they begged financially, that Sam Darnold, this would have been the best situation for him. It's actually the best situation for everyone. It's it's the best situation if you get to start. It's the best situation for Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones instead said, "No, I'm going to go where I can actually compete." So if Daniel Jones, who the Vikings wanted to bring back, felt even remotely like he was going to have a chance to compete with JJ McCarthy, then he would have come back and played for the Vikings as well because they wanted him. But instead, he said, "No, I'm going to go and I'm going to go to a place where I can compete with Anthony Richardson, where, I mean, there's a really good chance that he could beat him out." So that makes so much more sense. That even Daniel Jones and Sam Darnold, two other quarterbacks the Vikings wanted in the building, would both go, "All right, JJ's your guy. You're good." And I think that Schefter has been more accurate on these situations than a lot of the other insiders. He was the first to say that the Vikings were out on Sam Darnold and they were going with JJ McCarthy. And then today coming and definitively saying that. So it's people that have been historically closer to Rodgers, Pat McAfee, Silver, there's connections there. And if you're those people, I do not blame them as reporters for bringing that information to the table, that there is interest there. I also would not blame the Vikings if they find out how interested Aaron Rodgers is in them and they have a meeting and they get together and they say, we've got to at least do our diligence here of talking about it. Does anybody in the room have a good case for it? And the only way that you could actually potentially get there would be if Kevin O'Connell said, "I would just love to coach Aaron Rodgers for 1 year. I'll do anything to coach Rodgers for 1 year." And excuse me, there is one example of this almost happening, which is the San Francisco 49ers tried to convince Tom Brady to come back and play for 1 year in 2023 rather than going to Brock Purdy. Now, of course, Brock Purdy took them to the Super Bowl. So it's a good thing that they decided to stick with Brock Purdy. And that's the other point, too, about JJ McCarthy and being a young quarterback. But look around the league. CJ Stroud took his team to the playoffs in his first year. Bo Nix was in the playoffs. We saw Jaden Daniels do it. And when you look at this roster, it is so well set up for someone to have success right away. And having been in the building and behind the scenes for an entire year is not the same as being in college and coming into the NFL. He learned a ton. He saw a ton. He was able to work with the head coach on a daily basis. They had weekly meetings and they were going through everything that he would do as QB1. And he saw what a roller coaster it can be, how unforgiving, how ruthless, how to lead a team, as Sam Darnold did a phenomenal job of leading a team. So there's much, much more in terms of the mental preparation. Last year, he's learning how to throw a football, and now he's going to already know everything that goes into KOC's offense and everything else when he steps on the field as QB1 and he can be that leader. I just don't really see why this would make sense on any level, because you start the process now of JJ McCarthy. You're already spending all this money. That would be another thing too. I mean, if you sign Rodgers, okay, maybe he will claim that he'll sign for cheaper here than he would in New York or Pittsburgh, but he's not coming for nothing. And
Right.
what does that usually end up entailing? Well, void years, kicking dead cap down the road. And that's not the plan. So for the most part, here's the other thing too, Manny, is that there's just been so much. And look, all this could be blown up in 10 minutes if there was Rodgers getting announced as the Vikings quarterback. It'd all be blown up because it's the Vikings and we never know. But we've reached a cry wolf level with the Vikings where, because their quarterback situation has been in flux and because they had Justin Jefferson, a huge superstar, negotiating a contract, there's just been buzz about the Vikings and KOC Coach of the Year without a contract extension. There was so much buzz at different times. And we heard they could trade Jefferson. That never happened. We heard Kirk could come back. That never happened. We heard KOC was getting phone calls about potentially being traded somewhere. That never happened. And shout out to his agent for being a total fool if he's the one that put that out there the day of a really important game. I don't know that he did, but if he did, that would be one of the dumbest things I've ever heard from an agent. But let's just point out, though, that the vetting on stuff is not very good on information. And so when we get to this, and it's the fifth time, I mean, Darnold, all those, it was so weird to me, Manny. I came out of the combine and I was like, yeah, okay, they're moving on to McCarthy. That was everything I heard. And then I come out of the combine and I got insiders saying, no, Darnold could come back. I'm like, what? But I was just,
you were just there.
Right. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then we get back here and now it's, Aaron Rodgers is now another thing. Like at some point we've reached the level of everything this leadership does makes sense and sticks to this very specific plan. And what the people outside the building have continued to push is stuff that would be away from the plan. And they've never done any of that. So I think it should come along with a healthy amount of skepticism. And this is not me criticizing the reporters who are putting out things that they hear. It's just at some point, if none of it comes true, then what you're hearing probably isn't telling the reality of what's going to go down.
Well, and let's just hypothetically picture a scenario where Aaron Rodgers signs with the Vikings. What does this look like if he actually is now at this point 41 years old and just cooked? I mean, Brett Favre came back for a second season with the Vikings in 2010, and he was done. Like you could clearly see it early in that season, and they tried to make the sort of the Hail Mary move by trading for Randy Moss to get him back in and try to ignite that offense. But Favre was just done, and this was a year removed from having one of the best seasons of his entire career. So if you fast forward now, a decade and a half later to Aaron Rodgers kind of just having a so-so season really with the Jets in 2024, and the team itself did not perform very well. Like, certainly the Vikings would be sort of an upgraded roster from what the Jets were in 2024, but how do you really know Aaron Rodgers a year older is actually going to be able to perform even at the level that he performed at last year, which really wasn't even all that great? And if the Vikings are going to compete, they're going to need him to be better than that. And if he's not, you bring him in and he's not, and you start out like 1-3, and KOC decides to make a move because he's trying to sort of salvage the season. Let's get the young kid in there finally, try to, inject some more energy into this. Then how is Aaron Rodgers going to handle that, getting benched at 41 years old? And, is he going to, I mean, we've seen this happen now over the last couple of years with him, where it becomes more than just football related stuff. So I just don't really. It just does, to me. It doesn't make any sense for the Vikings to even want to bring that potential headache into the fold when you've got something going potentially with your young quarterback and all the free agent signings that you've made over the last couple of days. You're really building something that can be potentially sustained over the next, handful of years if you continue to do things right. And I just don't see the point in trying to inject Aaron Rodgers into something like that, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, and I've loved the plan. I've loved the plan of the young quarterback with a veteran team around him, not that different from like a Brock Purdy, where Purdy was surrounded by the Trent Williams, the Christian McCaffrey, they got the Nick Bosa, all this expensive veteran talent in a window, and they got this close. They got to overtime of almost beating the Kansas City Chiefs with this. And then the first time Jalen Hurts goes to the Super Bowl, same deal. He's a younger quarterback with a lot of veterans around him, a very strong team around him. And he ends up being able to lead that team and go deep. And I think, what was it, his second full year of starting? Maybe it was his third year of his career, but his second full year of starting. And the thing about Aaron Rodgers is, I just pulled it up, since 2021, when he was the MVP of the league. And I just real quick to stop to say, I covered enough Aaron Rodgers games to have a full respect for this man's career and how great he was. Okay.
Absolutely.
This was it. There's a few players I look at who I feel like an honor to be able to cover, to be able to see, to go to their games, to be on a conference call with, and things like that. Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers. So full respect for this. He's done nasty things to the Vikings for years, but since that 2021 season, he has a quarterback rating of 90.7 since then. And his win loss is 13-21. And those were on good teams. Those were on the Packers. Those were on the Jets. And if I'm not mistaken, the whole argument of him going to the Jets was, well, look how stacked they are. Look how
Yeah.
good their defense is. They've got Garrett Wilson. Oh, well, how about this? How about we go get you Devontae Adams? And yet none of that was good enough to work because age comes for absolutely everybody. Tom Brady in his last season went 8-9, barely slipped into the playoffs, and was out of gas. And I know Peyton Manning won the Super Bowl in one of the goofiest Super Bowl wins ever, but was atrocious. And you know what it projects like? It projects like a Kirk thing, where they would have the young quarterback and then the guy gets there, it's not good enough. They're middling or bad, and then you end up having to go to the young quarterback anyway, which you just should have all the whole time. The Falcons just should have drafted Michael Penix and started him day one, and they would have been fine. But instead, they talked themselves into needing the veteran quarterback. So I think this is not something the Vikings should have a lot of interest in. There's not a lot of reporting that makes me think that it's something they'll do. And, the whole idea, the whole concept that you would have a better chance to go to the Super Bowl with Rodgers than McCarthy, I think is wrong. I just think it's wrong based on the way that the guys played. I think there's more precedent to suggest that you could get deep in the playoffs with a quarterback who just started this year than there is to suggest that Aaron Rodgers will go from the 13-21 quarterback since 2021 on two good teams to magic, and all of a sudden he's got it again and he's a completely different person. It just doesn't meet the smell test for how this guy had played. And if it was just 1 year ago that he was great, okay, maybe you could talk me into it. But we're talking about many years now and a whole year missed with an Achilles. Nothing about this really matches up. But I do think that if you're the Vikings and Rodgers is calling you saying, I want to play for you, you have to have a meeting. You have to have a conversation. And here's the other thing too, is even though I could see the Wilfs because they're obsessed with the Packers, we know they are, even though I could see them saying, can we talk about it? Because it's Rodgers, right? We've seen him destroy the Vikings for so many years. I still cannot see them being so illogical to say like, oh yeah, we drafted this quarterback who the organization loves, and then we should just put him aside on ice for a year to have someone who hasn't been good for quite some time and brings a total circus, which I don't think the Wilfs want. I mean, every single Pat McAfee appearance is some sort of like circus in its own way, all that stuff. I mean, there's just so many reasons not to do it that the only reason to do it is because Rodgers seems to want to.
Do you think Kevin O'Connell on like August 5th wants to be sitting in front of the media answering questions as to where the hell his quarterback is? Because his quarterback is on some island doing ayahuasca and nobody knows where he is. Nobody's heard from him for 3 days. Like Kevin doesn't want to answer those types of questions. He doesn't want to deal with that. He wants to talk about football and the football team and who's there and who's showed up for training camp and who's getting ready for the season. Like I keep going back to, you mentioned it too, the circus, everything non-football that would come along with bringing Aaron Rodgers into the fold. I know Pittsburgh's been talked about. Maybe Mike Tomlin would be okay with dealing with that. They're in kind of a weird situation with, who is their quarterback going to be? They might be resigned to having to bring Russell Wilson back. I don't know. But I'm just, from the standpoint of the Vikings, everything that they've done over the last couple of years has been so calculated. And it's been all part of this major plan of trying to build this team into a contender, a team that can stay a contender for a sustainable amount of time. I just don't see any reason why they would want to deviate away from that just because, oh, it'd be kind of cool to see Aaron Rodgers wearing a purple uniform, or, oh, maybe we can reignite something from 3 or 4 years ago. The likelihood of that happening is just not very high, and I think it would just be a complete waste of time.
Sid's close personal friend says, glad to hear you're open minded. That's not how sports opinions work. Sports opinions work as in, I tell you what I think based on all of my knowledge and evidence, and you agree with it or disagree with it. So I don't have to be open minded to a bad idea. Otherwise, I would just say every idea is fine, I guess. Like, that's not how it works. This is a bad idea. And if they do it, I'll be shocked. And I would also lose trust in them, because one of the things that I have, I think, done pretty well with is they know what they're doing. So they bring in Sam Darnold, and there was a lot of Darnold's no good, he's the biggest butt. And I was like, I don't know, KOC might know. Like, he's probably got a good idea of what he can do. And through the Jefferson contract extension talk, it was like, I don't know. They seem to negotiate in good faith. I think it'll be fine. And it was fine. Like, all these things that I've kind of made a bet on, they understand what they're doing. When they got rid of Kendricks and Thielen and Dalvin Cook, like, I think that they know what's going on here. And I know it hasn't always applied to the draft, but a lot of these other things that they've done on the pro personnel side, the money they spent, even for this, I'm giving more benefit of the doubt on some of their current signings than I normally would, because they've been good at them, right? If they do this, I'm just, okay, I don't understand you guys at all. I thought I did, and then I don't. But also, Noah said, stop talking about Rodgers. And yes, I agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it is time to stop talking about Aaron Rodgers, because that's all I've got to say. It's a terrible idea for the Vikings to consider it. They should not. And I am also, Rebel Vikings, sick of talking about it. My phone lit up with a bunch of text messages the minute the Diana Rossini report came out. And I was just like, I don't want any part of this. This plan is great. This plan is great. McCarthy is a great quarterback prospect, and you have built a great roster around him. And we're going to talk about that. And just go do that, because that wins all the time in the NFL. Pulling in a Rodgers, I mean, I guess you could call it Brady to Tampa Bay, but I think those are guys on two different levels.
Oh,
So
yeah.
anyway, all right, let's talk about this then. Let's just, for the rest of the show, we are just assuming Aaron Rodgers is not a Minnesota Viking. Okay, that is out of our view. And if it happens, then I'll have to talk about it then, and I'll say that I misread the room and they surprised me and whatever. But as of right now, I am standing on, I don't think this is any more than Rodgers trying to get himself to Minnesota. That's what I think it is. And I respect the effort. Manny, I need to get your opinion on how the Vikings handled the early days of the free agency here. What did you think of how they spent their money?
I thought they did pretty well. They addressed a lot of the needs that they have. I think, you and I talked about interior of the defensive line quite a bit, and they went and got two guys that are going to help with that. They're a little bit longer in the tooth, but they're good football players, and they have a proven track record. And, I think that's good. We talked about the interior of the offensive line. They've gone out and addressed that as well. And, we talked about corner. They've gone out and they've addressed that as well. You lose Cam Bynum in free agency to the Colts. Well, that's part of the reason why giving Theo Jackson an extension was really smart. And it made a lot of sense, because now he's a guy that can kind of step into a larger role in the secondary for you. So I thought, bringing back Aaron Jones, I thought was a really solid move. We talked about that, as well as, you can bring him back and maybe lighten the workload a little bit, have him, bring his usage rate down from what it was in 2024. And then you go out and you draft somebody, or you go out in free agency and get another sort of younger player that can kind of split those carries, split that usage with Aaron Jones. I think that makes a lot of sense. So they've done a lot of, this is kind of the second offseason in a row where, like, pretty much everything they've done, I'm like, yes, this is good. This makes sense. I like it. I see what you're doing. It makes a lot of sense. And now the fact that they've addressed so many needs, in free agency, and they still have the draft coming up too. Now they have a little bit more flexibility with what they can do. They don't feel compelled to say, like, we have to get a defensive tackle with our first round pick. We have to take a corner with our first round pick, because they've addressed some of those needs already. Now they can kind of weigh their options a little bit more, and maybe more so go with like a best player available type of approach in that position, and have the guys in place that they've signed already that are going to help them immediately.
So I think it would be a little bit on the nitpicky side for me to look at Jonathan Allen's contract, which is not 3 years, 60 million. It's really 2 years. And the second year has a much bigger cap hit, but it can be brought down with a restructure, which I'm sure that they will end up doing. There's only a little bit of a nitpick there, which is there was a couple of defensive tackles that I liked who were younger that signed for less. And I am totally lost at why Levi Onwuzurike today from the Detroit Lions, who the Vikings saw murder them, only got like $5-something million on a 1-year contract. Maybe it's him betting on himself. And Noah brings up Rico Dowdle. That's another one that was incredibly cheap. And they did not bring back Aaron Jones at incredibly cheap. Now, Aaron Jones is a better receiver than Rico Dowdle, and that's not even remotely close. Aaron Jones had 51 catches last year, over 400 yards. We cannot forget what a big weapon Aaron Jones is receiving wise. But if we're playing, this is the thing, I've had to recalibrate my brain, Manny, because we spent so long having to go, ooh, at that price, with that void year, with that money, and now they can't do this or that. But I've had to now go, well, wait a minute. That doesn't matter. Like with the cap situation that they have right now is so healthy. And not only that, the NFLPA put it out because you can carry over cap space from the previous year. The Vikings have even more than what the actual cap is. So the cap is 279, but they can actually use 284. And it's like, man, they are just money coming out of their ears. So they don't have to be the shrewdest, and they can go, okay, Jonathan Allen, we just want you. And what is left of Jonathan Allen is better than pretty much everybody else. And Javon Hargrave is another one where the 49ers ran themselves into cap hell and had to cut ties with a lot of good players. He's coming off an injury, but they got him for $30 million, which seems very reasonable. And it probably won't actually be $30 million because it's all funny money. And so I think that the signings that they made, and Will Fries, I think we all agree is a good one. Lock in that spot, guy who's getting better. There should be no complaints about Byron Murphy at the real price of Byron Murphy, which was the same as Charvarius Ward. And I completely would rather take him than Ward, who's getting older. So I think that they've done a really good job of hitting on the big stuff. What comes next, though, is important. And here's another nitpick is like Kevin Zeitler signed for 1 year, $9 million. And like, oh, now Will Fries is a 5-year deal. So that's somebody for long-term. Zeitler, I think, is a right guard. So I get it, but I go, oh, like that's a pretty good deal. But I've got to stop doing that, because this would be like if you go to the grocery store and you're looking at the TV dinners and you're like, those are a pretty good deal. And you walk by the $20 steak and you're like, no, too expensive. Like, no, the $20 steak is way better.
Yeah.
Even if it's overpriced, it's way better than what you'd be getting for the TV dinner. So there's a little bit of like this push and pull with me. But I think what happens next, Manny, is going to be very interesting to see, because the Cooper Kupp conversation is now out there. I'm for this because even though I don't think Cooper Kupp is anywhere near what he was a couple of years ago, I think there's a lot of precedent for receivers that are a little bit older, a little bit long in the tooth, who on a team like this can be wide receiver 2/3, fit into the right role and give their team a lot. So I think if you're Kevin O'Connell, you should just block Aaron Rodgers' number and maybe call Cooper Kupp. And even if Cooper Kupp is not what he once was, 67 catches last year, he had the 35th highest PFF grade, which puts you as a solid number 2/3 type of wide receiver in the NFL.
Yeah, I love the potential fit of Cooper Kupp here. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago when the story came out that the Rams were going to basically move on from him. I think it makes all the sense in the world, especially now if you're not even having to I mean, we were talking about, would would the Vikings make a trade to bring him in and sort of absorb some of that money? Now you're in a position where you don't even have to do that. You don't have to give up anything to get him. You can just sign him. And I think it just makes all the sense in the world, as long as you're not having to rely on Cooper Kupp to be your number one option, which clearly he would not be that here. I think it's a great fit. We talked about them adding pieces to their offense that can kind of help with the short passing game a little bit more, especially JJ McCarthy is a guy that's probably going to lean on that part of the passing game a little more than maybe Sam Darnold did. I think sort of adding that safety blanket of Cooper Kupp and then pairing that with the other weapons that this team has, I think I think it would be a great fit. Cooper Kupp knows the offense. I mean, he Kevin O'Connell coordinated that offense that won the Super Bowl in 2021. So I think it would be a great fit. I would hope that the Vikings do their due diligence and have a conversation with him and bring him in. And if it happens, I would absolutely love it. I think it'd be a great move.
We've also seen KOC's ability to convince people to come here, which happened, and I should throw Brian Flores in that as well,
Yep.
with Stephon Gilmore last year. Stephon Gilmore, I know, had another team in mind that he wanted to sign with, but the Vikings brought him in and they showed him around. They were like, "Are you sure you don't want to just be in this facility? It's pretty nice. And look at this team and look at the way this culture is and all that sort of stuff. The coaching is." And he eventually said yes. And even Daniel Jones, who had no real reason to come to the Vikings other than, how about I go to KOC's rehab center for quarterbacks and I'll work with him behind the scenes for a half a year and see how that plays out. And maybe it'll help my reputation. I think it did help his reputation. I don't think that anybody is paying Daniel Jones what he got paid to compete for a starting job had he played out the rest of the year with the New York Giants. I really don't. I think that it helped that he came in. They were like, well, if KOC likes him, then, and KOC is friends with Shane Steichen. And then, you kind of get that connection there. So I think that if there's a player like Cooper Kupp, and this goes for a few other guys too, I don't know, like maybe Tyler Lockett or I don't know about Amari Cooper. He looked pretty washed last year, but I do think that there is a wide receiver 3 spot that's pretty important here. And I think they need to add a different type of wide receiver to that position. And Kupp would be that guy, even if he's not the, even if he's not the Jake Reed or whatever, even if he's not that caliber, but he's more of just the comparison I keep making is Anquan Bolden, but even like what Alshon Jeffrey brought to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017, where he wasn't the same Alshon Jeffrey, where he was mossing people left and right. He's pretty darn good. So I think that has to be something that they address here in the coming days. I want to pull up, Manny, the top 100 from The Athletic. I've been using this as just kind of my baseline for looking at what free agents are remaining and go through with you and talk about if there's any that we think the Vikings should go after here and who's still available. So I'll keep scrolling as most of them are taken care of. Stephon Diggs still out there. That's not happening. But I don't think Zadarius Smith is coming back. We already talked about Rodgers. Mekhi Becton, I don't think is happening. They signed a right guard already. Now, this is an interesting one, and somebody in the chat brought up Tevin Jenkins. It is notable that Tevin Jenkins does not have a job yet. Could that be health related? He's had some back issues, but I like the idea of really going all in here, Manny. If you were talking about, and there's some risk to that, but if you were talking about a Darisaw, Jenkins, Kelly, Fries, O'Neal offensive line, I mean, that's a pretty imposing offensive line to bring to the yard.
If they're going to tell me that Kelly and Jenkins are both going to be healthy for a majority of the season, I like that. I like that 5. And I know Kelly's got, the last couple of years he's been banged up a little bit too, but when he's healthy, he's been one of the best centers in the NFL. And I think Jenkins, very good player too. Health issues obviously are there, but if he's healthy, I think at this point, when you've got the other 4 guys in place on the offensive line, I think it's worth taking a flyer on Jenkins, even if there are some concerns. Obviously, the price tag would matter in that too. But I think at this point, when you've seemingly you've got the other 4 spots on the offensive line solidified, I think taking a flyer on Jenkins and just seeing like, hey, can this guy hold up for a full season? He's at a good age. He's what did you see? You see there, he's 27 years old, so he's at a good age. He's not like an aging player. I think at this point it would be worth a gamble and worth taking a flyer on him and bring him in and plug him in and solidify the line.
Thank you to whoever it was, Randall, that mentioned that there's a filter for the best available player. Thank you. That does make it nicer. Noah asks if Kupp is worth it or if it's just the name. I think he's worth it because he still had a good season last year, but the problem for the Rams was the money versus the good season. And this happens a lot with star players for teams. Like think about Adam Thielen. Like Adam Thielen with the Vikings couldn't take a small contract. Adam Thielen can go somewhere else and take a fairly small contract. And it just kind of works that way. It would look bad for him if he stays with the team for almost nothing. But if he goes somewhere else and signs a small deal, if okay, like it's run its course kind of thing. And that appears to be how it is with him. Rasul Douglas, I like that idea. I think he's a good veteran corner. But just to finish the point on Kupp, he's not a star anymore, not a big superstar. But if he came into the Vikings and caught 40 passes, blocked pretty well, and caught some stuff underneath and handful of touchdowns in the red zone, played 14 games, that's worth bringing him in. That's a lot of value. Yeah, I saw that Draymond Jones just signed. He was kind of interesting to me as an interior rusher. Let's keep going on the list. Rasul Douglas didn't have a great year last year, veteran corner, but okay. I'm kind of intrigued by Keenan Allen, though. Are you, Manny?
Yeah, I mean, he had some moments with the Bears last year, and he's another one of those guys who that's just kind of a veteran, and you don't need him to step in and be your number one target. You know what I mean? He's just a guy that you can kind of plug him in, much like what we were saying with Cooper Kupp, and just catch everything underneath. You know, I mean, we saw him do that literally in a Chargers uniform when the Chargers came here to play the Vikings in 2023, where he just caught, what do you have, like 15 catches or something in that game? It was just ridiculous. And it was just Justin Herbert, just quick drop, dump it off to Keenan Allen real quickly. Like that's an element that this Vikings offense, I think, could really use. And Allen can do that. Cooper Kupp can do that. If it's not Cooper Kupp and it ends up being Keenan Allen, sign me up. I'd be for it.
Sorry, where was the question? 420 Sports, how would Kupp fit? Would he really want to be a slot guy? Actually, for his career, he's been much more of a slot guy than he has been an outside wide receiver. So I think so. Keenan Allen, you're right. Go Wolves. He is slow, but let me tell you, I watched 2 games of Vikings and Bears tape last year because I go through the tape after every game, and then I do my tape study on purpleinsider.football. Great place to go sign up if you want. And let me tell you, that man was still open. He could still run routes. And this is the type of player, because we're not talking about somebody who's a huge signing for wide receiver 3, but can you put somebody who can be an underneath quick option for the quarterback, JJ McCarthy? Now, here's another one that's available that I'm sort of interested in is J.K. Dobbins, Manny, because if you look, can you tell what I look at by the ads? Can you tell what most of my musician's friend with a million guitars here? But J.K. Dobbins is interesting to me because he played a part-time role last year, and we just saw Rico Dowdle hardly get any type of money, 6.5, and that's, I'm sure, the max of Rico Dowdle. If J.K. Dobbins, and I'd like them to draft a running back. I'm in on R.J. Harvey. I'm in on a bunch of guys, but they only have so many draft picks, and Dobbins was explosive for them last year. I need a duo that's a little bit more reliable and a little bit more explosive, but I'm kind of interested as we're just going through the list here of available free agents. If you told me that they signed Dobbins to 1 year, $5 million or something, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense.
Can he come in and give you a little bit more than what like Cam Akers gave the Vikings in 2024? You know what I mean? Because I think that's the big question with J.K. Dobbins is just, can he be healthy? Because when he's been out there, he's been pretty good. It's just he's never been able to really stay healthy for an entire season. And this, I want to say, 2024, probably I think his rookie year he played. How many games did he play his rookie year? I think he played 15 games with the Ravens.
Yeah, he was good his rookie year. Yep.
Yeah. But he's just been so banged up since then. And last year, I think, what did he play? 13 games last year with the Chargers, but 900 yards. I mean, that's that's pretty productive. I think if you can bring him in and keep him healthy, and maybe you if he's splitting reps with Aaron Jones, that might be a way to kind of keep him fresh for an entire season. And you don't have to worry about him getting too banged up or wearing down later in the year. And that would, I think, apply for both of those guys, really, if they can kind of split carry. So I'd be fine with it. I think the biggest question with him is just, can he stay healthy and be reliable in that regard?
I do appreciate that you guys have browser hacks to not get the ads, but the thing is, I'll tell you a secret. Look at how cool this ad is though. It's all these awesome guitars. I'm like, I'm interested in this one, interested in that one. So I kind of like that it's always showing up with cool guitars. Amari Cooper, I'd kind of be out on. I just don't think there's a lot left there. Asante Samuel Jr. not getting a job already is a little surprising to me. Brandon Sheriff, I swear, if he comes to the Vikings, we're going to throw a huge party because of the number of times that we have talked about this man
He
on
comes
the
up every
show.
year. He
Every
comes up every
year,
year. Yeah.
what are we going on? Maybe 5 years of whether it's being traded or free agency. He could still play, and one veteran wouldn't be a bad idea. The Delvin Tomlinson thing is out the window because they signed DTs, Tyler Lockett. I was also looking at a table earlier today on Wayfair, so shout out to them. They should sponsor the show. Calais Campbell would be hilarious that they just get all old defensive tackles. But I don't think there's too many other of these guys that are high on the list that are of intrigue. We don't know what's going on at safety. Elijah Moore is another wide receiver that might be that wide receiver 3. Will Hernandez, kind of interesting. That's been a guy I've mentioned for a long, again,
Yeah.
I'm going to start calling these guys longtime Viking. Longtime Viking Will Hernandez and Brand Sheriff. So we've talked about them so many times. Mike Hilton, kind of interesting there. He's been a good player still. Akella Witherspoon. So, they're around. They're around. But I think they need to probably now, Manny, fill out some spots like depth linebacker.
Yeah.
I think now is the time to kind of see what is remaining and go out and just fill the other spots. Like they've got mostly a whole roster. They need an answer for their safety, but I'm starting to think though that Harrison Smith is coming back because they just seem to ignore the safety market. And even Javon Holland tweeted, there was some report that the Vikings were in on Javon Holland and he was like, no, they weren't. So I don't know. That's kind of how it feels. That's the vibe that I'm getting.
I was thinking that too, and it kind of feels like if Harrison Smith were going to retire, we would probably know by now. Like, I feel like if and he's kind of talked about like when he does retire, he's just gonna do it, and kind of it's not gonna be a big thing. Like he's just gonna kind of disappear into the go off the grid, quote unquote, so to speak. But I think that if he were actually going to be done, I think we would know it at this point, and the Vikings would know it, and we'd probably see them, probably spend a little more in free agency on the safety position. So yeah, it kind of feels like he's probably going to be back, and I'm cool with that. He's still certainly not the player he was 5-6 years ago, but he's still a pretty good player, very smart, one of the smartest players that we have in the entire league. And I think he can still definitely have a positive role for this defense.
So I looked this up. It was right around this time that he came back last year, and there was a press conference or something about him coming back or whenever it was, but it was somewhere around now and a little bit after this that he decided to come back. But I would have thought that there would be a safety here by now because they've come off the board pretty quick.
Yeah.
And Justin Simmons is still out there, but Justin Reed, Javon Holland, Trayvon Morig, like a bunch of these guys signed pretty quick. And if the Vikings thought, oh yeah, he's done, he just hasn't announced it yet, then there probably would have been a bigger signing. That's just trying to read the tea leaves there. Matt says finally the depth linebacker. The only thing I got for depth linebackers, they need one. CJ Mosley released by the Jets. Sure. Like, that Flores loves his guys like that have some ability to be a pass rusher, drop back in coverage. Skol guy, what are we doing for offensive line depth is a good question. I'm just waiting on the trade for Garrett Bradbury, but I also think that there's once you sign a center for that type of contract, the rest of the league knows, yeah, you're going to release him because he's
Mhm.
never played guard before. You don't take a guy who started on this team since 2019 at the one and only center position and then say, all right, you're actually a backup now. You're actually depth for Ryan Kelly. Sorry, you got a contract, pal. Like, Steve asks, are the signings going to have a press conference? We heard from PR today. So I guess with Jonathan Allen, he was going to the other day and then timing didn't work out. And now there's a bunch of guys who have signed. So they're going to do virtual press conferences and they've all signed, dispersed, gone back to Florida or whatever, so that'll happen. That's going to happen in the coming days. But I think the next answer here is just what they're going to do at the left tackle, or I'm sorry, left guard position,
Yeah.
because I do like the idea of Hernandez. Everybody knows that by now, since I've mentioned it since 2018 that I like Will Hernandez, and I still do. But this to me, Manny, that's what I got circled in the draft now. I still like the idea of a defensive tackle for the future, but there's going to be some guards there that I think if you look at how much they're getting paid, if you hit on a guard in the first round and you get that guy on his rookie contract, he's going to be worth 20 million this year, but some average guards getting 25 next year. That is just going up and up and up as the DTs get better. So I'm suddenly liking an idea that I usually would not have liked, which would be a guard in the first round.
There's a ton of value in how much money you are saving by not having to go and get another person to sort of fill in another hole that you have. I mean, the Vikings have done a great job, I think, in spending in free agency and solidifying two spots on their offensive line. So you've got 80% of your offensive line solidified right now. And if you can get somebody in the draft to get that last 20% sort of stabilized, a guy who's young and cheap and has a chance to be really, really good, sign me up for that, man. That's a home run. That'd be a home run move right there for them. So I think, we talked about Tevin Jenkins, obviously, and I think, if you can get him in for cheap and put him in at left guard, and then, you've got that, you got your whole line solidified, perhaps, depending on the health of Jenkins. I like that idea too, but you can just go and use your first round pick on a guy that is slotted to go in that spot, or maybe a guy that fell a few spots that you didn't think would be there, but now he is, and he's good, and you just plug him in, and he gives you what you've been missing really for the last several years. Yeah, that would be a home run hit for Kwesi.
Well, what they've really been missing is they've been missing somebody who I think is physically imposing to the other team.
Yeah.
Will Fries is pretty big and he plays physical. So you like his play style, if you will. Ryan Kelly being older is less imposing than he used to be. I think early in his career, Ryan Kelly was a legitimately dangerous player as a center, but now he's good. But if you're talking about taking even a Tyler Booker that didn't have the greatest combine, but look at his size, look at how he plays, or a Gray Zabel who is a 98th percentile athlete, somebody who can actually be a difference maker at that position and not he won't get you beat. He's going to hang on for dear life. I would prefer somebody where you go, when that guy pulls, watch out. When that guy is going up against their best DT, it's physical freak on physical freak. That's what I would like to see. And I don't think you get those guys later in the draft. I think you get those guys only early in the draft. And a lot of times, just like every other position, you go and you look at the numbers, you go, who's the best in the league? Where was that guy drafted? First round. Where's that guy drafted? Second round. Like a lot of this is like that. And in the past, I would have felt like, that guard position, like make sure you get your tackle. Oh, whoa. We got news. We got news just as we were talking about it, Manny. 6-time Pro Bowl safety Harrison Smith will return for a 14th NFL season per our friend Tom Pelissero. How about that, Manny? Welcome back, Harrison Smith. Just as we were saying, we're reading the tea leaves and looks like he's probably coming back. Harry is back, Manny. Your reaction?
I love doing this stuff live because when it comes in right away, it's just like Boom. There you go. We got no, gets that's good. I think it's good. I think Harrison Smith can still play. I think he can still bring a lot to this defense. And he is, I mean, he was already solidified as a Ring of Honor guy in my book, and I think in a lot of other people's eyes. But this is he has, I think you come back for 14 years now. He is really, instilling himself as, just an all-time great Vikings player. And to have him back for another year is going to be really fun. And I think he's going to do a lot to help this defense continue to ascend. I think with everything else that they've added to the table now, I think this is a defense that has a chance to be really good again and even better than what they were in 2024. And I think Harrison Smith is going to help with that a ton. So this is big.
Harrison Smith gets $10.25 million base with incentives up to $14 million for his 14th season. So a lot less, half of what Javon Holland got to go to the New York Giants. And I know there's a big age difference there, but just the point for this year's salary cap, that's a fairly big investment on Harrison Smith, but one that's rightfully deserved. Now, when it comes to Harrison, I think the biggest part of it for him is his relationship with Brian Flores. And I have talked to him about this and how Harrison Smith said last year that one of the reasons he wanted to keep playing was because he connected so well. And Durante Jones, who's their defensive backs coach, this also applies to him, but Brian Flores, that he connected so well with Brian Flores and they just clicked. And if you know these two guys, Flores is an intense football psycho and Harrison Smith is an intense football psycho, and they're both brilliant. And these are two of the best defensive minds in football, and they just worked with each other so well. And what Harrison Smith became for Brian Flores is the coach on the field. The connection to Brian Flores can't be out there seeing everything that's happening before the snap and the checks and the changes and the motions and all the things that offenses try to do. But Harrison Smith can. And when they're working with the same brain, like think about musicians where you have the bass player and the guitar player and the drummer, we're all on point. They're all in the pocket, they call it. And I feel like it's the same way with Harrison Smith and Brian Flores, where they're just in the pocket. Like they're in the same spot. They see the same things. They make the same changes and adjustments. Harrison, they get the call in. He knows exactly what they're going to do. And he leads those other guys. And even though it's not a young defense, it's going to be an experienced defense. Everybody is looking to the leader to get the calls. And then because you have so much experience on this defense, when you make the calls, they can execute them. And now I think that has continuity going into a third year with now interior rush that they didn't have before. They bring back Byron Murphy, who knows, again, Brian Flores' defense inside and out, which I think was valuable. And Theo Jackson, who's been training in this defense behind the scenes while Cam Bynum was in front of him. But I expect him to step in and be a very similar level player. And you look around and go, what are they, one corner away from feeling really good about this? Now that safety is solidified, they have Josh Metellus is still in his role. That's another part of this. Don't you think, Manny, is that Metellus can play that same role?
Yeah, that's the role that we have seen Josh Metellus play over the last couple of years, especially last year, is exactly what he should be doing. It's where he is at his best as a football player. And if you put yourself in a situation where you have to kind of move him away from that, and he can still be good if you just have him be a straight up full-fledged safety, like I think he can do very well at that. But if you can keep him into doing what he is absolutely fantastic at doing, what's his bread and butter, that's you can't even put a price on that. So I think getting Harrison Smith back to sort of keep everything stabilized, certainly in the defensive backfield, but also allowing other guys like Josh Metellus to not have to sort of change and switch into something else, and deviate away from what has made him such a valuable piece of this defense, I think is absolutely huge. And you mentioned Theo Jackson now. He can kind of step into the Cam Bynum role now. So you lose Cam Bynum to free agency, got a lot of money from the Colts. Congratulations to him. But now you've got Theo Jackson that can just step right into that spot, and he's been kind of groomed and developed into being able to do that now. This is a really, really good scenario for this defense.
And Patrick says Bynum at 15 or Smith at 10. So the thing about the contract is, well, Bynum's was a 4-year contract. So that's a big investment that you're talking about over many years. And his contract should really be compared to Theo Jackson, who is taking his spot. And they're paying a lot less for Theo. What was it? The next 3 years, it's 12 million or something like that for Theo Jackson. But with Harrison Smith, it's a 1-year deal. So it's only going to be here for one season. If you can afford it this year, you're fine. And the way that the Vikings set up all of these cap hits with Jonathan Allen, Byron Murphy, all of them are set up to be very low in this year. And we'll see. I don't think Will Fries is yet in the system, but we'll see how that comes out. I imagine it'll be exactly the same, is to be able to do stuff like this, where you could say, all right, Harry, here's your 10 million bucks, come back and play. And what I've seen from Harrison Smith is once upon a time, 2017, that's some of the best safety play I've ever seen in my life. MVP caliber. I mean, every game, Harrison Smith is doing stuff that is just incredible from a mental perspective, from a physical perspective, game-winning interception against the Chicago Bears, sacks. I mean, it was everything. He was
wasn't he like second or third in defensive player of the year voting or something like that? He was really high on that list for DPOY.
He was, and it was the only year that he was all pro, but obviously he should have been all pro many other times during his career. But what I see now of Harrison Smith is somebody who has grown even from there, which I thought he was brilliant intellectually. The physical element is not the same as it was. I don't think that he would say that it is, but I also think he could still play at a top 20-ish level at his current state, where he's in the right place at the right time. He's going to catch the football if it's coming his way. He's going to get past breakups. He's going to come downhill and make tackles. Like, this is still a player who is much better than what you would normally expect to go out and get, much better than where Justin Simmons is right now in his career. But I think the most important thing of it is, and this was what Mike Zimmer used to tell us this about Anthony Barr all the time, and I believed him, that he would say, you guys don't understand all the mental stuff that Anthony Barr does out there as the play caller, as the guy who is adjusting the defense. And when you have a defense that's always moving and changing shape and is designed to read and react, the defense is designed to go out there with one defensive play call, see something from the offense, and Harrison Smith does a hand signal, and then it changes that defense. And that's one of the reasons they've been so freaking good. And this is why you have to have a veteran defense, and why Dallas Turner doesn't play a lot in his first year, in part because there's a lot to this. And that's how you get into the top 5 without as much talent as you would normally expect from a top 5 defense, is by having players like this. So this keeps most of the band together. Really, when we go through it, Manny, it's Theo Jackson replacing Cam Bynum. I'm comfortable with that. Dallas Turner replacing Patrick Jones. I'm very comfortable with that. I think that should be an upgrade, actually. They loved playing Patrick Jones, and it was a little much for me at times. On the defensive line, now with Hargrave and Allen and Phillips, that's really solid from where it was the upgrade there. And they still will play. There's probably another run stuffer they're going to play that in there somewhere. But think about from Jerry Tillery and Jonathan Bullard, who are like $1 million players that could be playing for the Birmingham Stallions, honestly. And no disrespect, because Bullard, I thought, played a really good role against the run last year. But I mean, those are barely in the league players versus now guys who have been stars in the league and can still rush the passer. You're keeping Van Ginkel, you're keeping Cashman, you're keeping Grenard, you're continuing to develop Ivan Pace. Mekhi Blackman comes back. You've added Isaiah Rodgers. You've kept Byron Murphy. I mean, this is nothing short of a defense that should be in the top 5 as long as it's healthy.
And it's amazing the kind of domino effect that bringing in a couple of guys, just upgrading on the interior of the defensive line, what kind of impact that can have on even the guy next to those two guys, Harrison Phillips. What what kind of impact is that going to have on what he's going to be able to do? It takes some pressure off of him, so that he doesn't have to be a guy that you rely on to apply a lot of pressure and from a pass rushing standpoint, because Allen and Hargrave can do that. That's what has made them such good football players over the last several years. So that takes a lot of weight off of Harrison Phillips. It takes a lot of weight off of your edge rushers. Takes a lot of pressure off of Van Ginkel. Takes a lot of pressure off of Jonathan Grenard. And when the pressure is off of those guys, that then takes even more pressure off of somebody like Dallas Turner as well, who can kind of step in and continue to develop and get better. Not a lot of pressure on him to produce even in year 2. Obviously, we want to see a little bit more and see some growth from him. But again, it's not for the second year in a row. It's not, all right, Dallas, go out there and get us 15 sacks. He doesn't have to do that. He's still got some guys in front of him that can really kind of hold some of that load. And now some pressure is getting taken off of those guys in front of Dallas Turner as well. So I love what they've done, the way they've constructed this defense. And now again, you go back to the draft now, you look ahead to the draft, the Vikings can really have some fun here, and they can really kind of look at all sorts of options, and everything's on the table for them to, address whatever kind of need that they want at this point. And at this point, it's really just about bringing in some depth, bringing in some younger guys in the draft that you can kind of slow cook and develop, and there's not a lot of pressure on them to produce right away. They're in a really good spot, and this kind of proves the method that we've talked about a lot, about building around the young quarterback, investing that money into other areas of the roster, and building it the right way. We've just seen it work way too many times to think that, the Vikings are to suggest that the Vikings are doing this wrong. I love what they're doing overall.
Well, and if they were not a cap healthy team, this might have been something that would have knocked off another signing. Like if they had to bring back Harrison Smith in the past, there were times where they were bringing back players like Kyle Rudolph, who was still a good player, but that meant they couldn't sign someone else. And now they're able to do that. I was thinking, as you were saying, takes pressure off this, that, and the other. It takes pressure off JJ McCarthy. If he knows that he has a good defense, and there was a big part of Sam Darnold's success last year was the fact that he was often playing from ahead. I mean, I don't know how many passes Sam Darnold threw from behind last year, trying to catch up. Not that many. I could only think of a couple of games, and part of it was, and I know they allowed some teams back in games later in the season, but they had such a good defense that they were getting ahead. They were causing turnovers, making plays. And I think Harrison Smith kind of solidifies that, as knowing it's going to be a lot of the same looks. It's not a lot of overhaul. It's just a few new veteran players popping in, rather than feeling like, okay, this is very different. Also probably confirms the Javon Holland saying the Vikings didn't make him a big offer, because now Harrison Smith is back. Benjamin asks, what's the weakest part of our roster right now? I think it's probably corner still. They could use one more. Mm-hmm. And just really depth. I think it's depth. Left guard they still need, but I think it's depth. I think they just need another running back. They need another receiver. Last night, Chris Trapasso floated getting a receiver in the first round. And I went like, really? And then I was like, oh, well, you know what? Since they're paying bad receivers a ton of money in free agency, and the Vikings have filled all these spots, I don't hate that. I think it would be confusing to Vikings fans at first, and then you go, well, maybe not. So anyway, Manny, can I pay you overtime to hang in and continue to talk about this? Because I've still got this fake schedule I made, and you need to pick the wins and losses.
Yeah.
And now it's even better to pick the wins and losses with Harrison Smith, knowing that he is back with the Minnesota Vikings. Now, let me real quick, though, talk about, before we get to picking that schedule, my fake schedule that I just made up, the legacy of Harrison Smith as a Viking. I think a 14th season does help him as far as his argument for the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame has become even more stingent, I guess. And I don't like that. I think, like, what? You already have too many guys that are on the outside. Like, don't do that. That's going to make it harder. But one of the things that Harrison Smith is missing that he could really use would be some more playoff moments. And this gives him another opportunity to do that. playing on an elite defense gives you a little more time in the sun to show off. But I think that we are talking about Harrison Smith, and it's kind of cool to see him still playing at a high level late in his career. One of the all-time great Vikings.
No question about it. I mean, this franchise has a deep, rich history of great players, Hall of Fame level players, even some guys who are not in the Hall of Fame and probably should be, Jim Marshall. But and I think Harrison Smith, the fact that he has spent his entire career here and he has gone through multiple head coaches, he has had to, endure being on some bad teams, but he's also been a part of some really terrific teams as well over the course of his career. And he's so beloved in this town by the fans. He is so well respected by the organization. Obviously, they love him, and I'm sure they're just over the moon that he's coming back for a 14th year. He is, when you start thinking about Vikings football over the last 2 decades, certainly you're going to think of guys like Adrian Peterson. Obviously, you're going to think of guys like Justin Jefferson and what he's been able to do his first handful of years in the league. Harrison Smith has been a staple piece of this organization through all of that, through a lot of what we've seen over the last decade and a half. And so he deserves his flowers. I have all the respect in the world for him. The fact that he's been able to sort of maintain this really good level of play at that position for this long, I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. He's an all-timer, man. He's that Ring of Honor for sure. And I think when his legacy is finalized, he's going to be remembered, I think, for a long time as one of the great Vikings of all time.
Yeah, Dwayne brings it up. There are very few safeties in the Hall of Fame, and the Hall of Fame monitor on Pro Football Reference does not love his chances despite how accomplished he is. And I did a study on this now 2 years ago. We've been talking about Harry maybe retiring, but I really looked close into this and talked to Brian Flores about it, talked to Durante Jones and his teammates, and then I also looked at the data. And I think the PFF data might actually help him as much as any player because it really demonstrates not only how good he was in his prime, but the longevity that he's had and the impact that he's had, where interceptions in this day and age where quarterbacks don't throw a lot of picks is just not a good way to do it. Now, I mean, Paul Krause was a GOAT, but those quarterbacks were just hucking that pigskin 40 yards down the field, overthrowing people left and right. And in that era, you just got a lot of picks if you played a lot. That's not how it works now. It's much more of a position that's harder to just say, oh, tackles, oh, interceptions. But that's where some of the extended data, especially how he's used and all those things, could help his case. And I hope we've also moved on from Pro Bowls when there's some really funny Pro Bowlers at this point. And all I want to do is to implore Harrison Smith to start a podcast talking about his final season. He has an open offer from Purple Insider for a weekly appearance because Harrison Smith is one of the quietest players in the NFL. And having had this opportunity to cover him for all these years, I could tell you he's super interesting dude. He's got a lot of funny opinions on things like golf, movies, like all that stuff. You could talk to him about off-field stuff all day long. He's a really interesting dude and is also brilliant and has played long enough where if you want to go check out my article, search Purple Insider and Peanut Punch, because I talked to Harry about the Peanut Punch and the development of Peanut Tillman being in the league and him being the only one that did it to now everyone does it and that kind of thing. So it's been a really cool. And I told Harrison this on the way out of Arizona when he left. I said, hey, if this is it, man, it's been an honor. And that continues to watch him, to learn about football from him. So I hope he finds a way to let everybody in a little bit. He's always kept everybody at arm's length. Let everybody in, Harrison Smith, and let the Vikings fans know how cool you are in the last year. So let's do this, Manny. Let's pick a fake schedule now that we know that Harrison Smith is back. I think we've got 80% of the answers for the Vikings. We know who the quarterback is for sure. And we know who else is back. We know what this roster looks like now. So let's go through it. let's go through this and just a reminder. It is a fake schedule. This is not the real Viking schedule, but it is their real opponents. And if you are new to the show, which I think a lot of people are this week, welcome. Great to have you here. What we do all the time in the season is have Manny pick the schedule, and then we just see where the expectations are and see how it comes out. So I've created this fake schedule for Manny to pick with the current Vikings roster and how many wins you think they will get, and JJ McCarthy at quarterback. So let's start it out. My fake opener with real opponents is Vikings and Lions at US Bank Stadium. Is that a win or a loss, Manny, in the opener of the 2025 season?
I'll call it a win.
JJ McCarthy not only starts out with a W, but starts out with a W against his hometown club. Okay, I could buy that. We know Lions Vikings are going to play close games.
Yep.
Week 2, I've got them playing in my fake scheduled real opponents, the Atlanta Falcons at home. Michael Penix coming to play JJ McCarthy, two guys that were drafted right next to each other. How does McCarthy and the Vikings fare at US Bank Stadium against the Falcons?
I like Michael Penix a lot. I think he's going to be really good. I'm still not sure how good Atlanta as a team is going to be yet. I think we're going to need to kind of continue to see some growth from Penix as he develops. They've got some good talent around them. I'm not sure if they've really done a whole lot to improve their defense. I'll give the Vikings the win at home to take care of business against the Falcons.
All right, a 2-0 start to the JJ McCarthy era. Week 3, the Vikings go out to a familiar place and play a familiar quarterback at Seattle against Sam Darnold. How about that? 2 years in a row where they've let a quarterback go and then they got to face him the next year. And again, if you're just popping in here, big audience tonight, so I appreciate all you guys. We're picking a fake schedule, but it's the real opponents. And now with Harrison Smith back, we have a lot of the answers of the offseason, and we can tell how strong this team really is, and we can try to project what they're going to be for the first time. And then we'll track that throughout the offseason, training camp, preseason. It's always a fun bit. So week 3 at Seattle, you're not going to have the Vikings lose to Sam Darnold, are you?
I don't know. Seattle is a tough place to play. And when the Vikings went out there last year, they ended up winning the game. Big throw from Darnold to Jefferson to win the game. But that was a tough, hard-fought win that the Vikings had to go into Seattle and earn. That crowd was nuts. But the flip side is I don't really know with the Seahawks moving on from DK Metcalf. They still have JSN, which I think he's going to be really, really good. He's going to continue to get better. And I think Sam has a chance to go there and play pretty well. I just don't know how good that team is actually going to be overall. So, it is Seattle, though. I'll give the Seahawks a close win.
Wow. Okay. Sam Darnold, a literal revenge game. And yes, I know that JJ McCarthy is not from Michigan, but he went to Michigan. Hometown team, same difference. I know he's from the Chicago area. You could also say he gets revenge against the Jaguars when he faces, because he went to IMG. I don't know. He's been around. Okay. Just make the connection with me. Let's not be too serious. All right. So they start 2-1 with a tough loss at Seattle. And that was one of the rare environments that I've covered a game where I did think it may have impacted the game. I thought the Vikings were kind of a little shocked by that noise. Eagles coming to town. The Super Bowl champs will play the Vikings at US Bank Stadium. Do they win?
No, I think this is going to be an Eagles win. The Eagles have lost some guys off of their Super Bowl team. Milton Williams, losing him, I think was pretty big, but they still have a lot of talent and still one of the best rosters in the league, one of the better quarterbacks and one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in football. And I think, just coming off that Super Bowl, it's an organization that has a lot of confidence in what they're doing now. So I'll give the Eagles the win. But I think the Vikings are talented enough now to compete with them and keep it close. So I'll give the Eagles a very close victory at US Bank Stadium.
All right, 2-2 start with our fake schedule with real opponents. on to the Meadowlands to face the New York Giants and Aaron Rodgers. This is a little harder because we don't know who the quarterback is, but I think one thing we can assume is the quarterback won't be good. There's no good quarterback that if it's Shadur Sanders, if it's Aaron Rodgers, if it's there's no option that's Russell Wilson that's going to make them a good team. So Vikings at Giants.
Yeah, I'm going to call this a win, and I don't even think it's going to be particularly close.
Okay, now the next one is interesting. They got to go from New York to Dallas and face the Cowboys. The Cowboys became a meme again the other day where all the signings were coming in. It was like, oh, this guy's signing there, this guy's signing there. And they like re-signed their long snapper. They seem to refuse to want to do anything, which is pretty strange, I gotta say, because I always used to think of Jerry Jones as it's like he's going to go out and he's going to make the big splash and whatever. And they got to pay Micah Parsons. They've already paid a ton of money to Dak Prescott for the biggest contract in the league. They seem a little bit asleep at the wheel, but yet they still have talent. So will the Vikings go into Dallas and get a W?
Kind of a tough place to play. That crowd can get pretty loud when the Cowboys are really, really good.
Sun can get in your eyes.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not entirely sure how good the Cowboys are going to be. Like you said, they have talent, but they got, Brian Schottenheimer as head coach is just, how's that really going to go? Not really wowing anybody with that choice at head coach. Dak is good. We know Dak is good, but like, how much winning has he really done? I think JJ McCarthy, I think this is going to be the first game that JJ McCarthy like really has a really good game. It's on the road against a decent opponent. But I think this is where JJ like really breaks out and has a like, wow, okay. Vikings have their young quarterback. Like this is going to be the eyebrow raising game for JJ McCarthy, and the Vikings come away with a win.
All right. I agree with you there. And I think that Dak is just not the same as he used to be and is more of a middling pocket quarterback now. I think he had a run where he was leading top offenses and was that good, but there's a lot of injuries now on Dak. Packers home against the Packers. Jordan Love, JJ McCarthy, futures of the NFC North. This battle will be going on for many years to come. Who will win JJ McCarthy's first chance at the old cheese faces?
Not really sure what the Packers are doing right now.
They got a really expensive guard. Is he
good?
The
Banks signing was just, I saw that. I was like, really? What did he get?
Who's catching the football still? Who's catching the football?
What did Banks get? 77 for 4 years or something
nuts.
like that?
Yeah.
It's just like, what are they doing?
I don't know.
Yeah, the Packers are well coached. I think Jordan Love is really good, but they haven't really done a lot to really improve their roster. So as of right now, I'll give the Vikings the win at home. Might have a different feeling once the Lambeau game comes up, but right now, if you're telling me US Bank Stadium, kind of first third of the season, give me the Vikings to win that one.
Okay. That means they would advance to 5-2 to start the JJ McCarthy era. And I just don't think high expectations for JJ McCarthy are crazy based on what we've seen from young quarterbacks, the development he's gotten behind the scenes, and the confidence from KOC. And not only that, but what we saw from KOC last year. It's a big factor when you're trying to project JJ McCarthy, what he was able to do with Darnold, and the fact that they were close during training camp. And there's a lot of talent for both of those guys as first round picks. So I think it's fair to project a high performance from JJ McCarthy if they're ready to go to him and he's the guy. So Commanders at home with a 5-2 record. They will face Jaden Daniels, and this is some kind of battle. I mean, can we have this tomorrow? Brian Flores' defense, Jaden Daniels on the offensive side. They went out and got Laramie Tunsil. I don't know what how about the Texans? Just as a side note, it's like, what it was, a Jay-Z who said they love me, then they hate me, then they love me again, or whatever. It's kind of like the opposite of that. It's like the Texans are stupid and then they're smart and then they're stupid again. It's like they were so dumb for so long, and then they get Stroud and Will Anderson and Hunter, and you go like, oh, are you smart? And then no, they're not. So that doesn't matter though. The Vikings are playing the Commanders in this fake schedule with real opponents as a 5-2 team. Do they win?
Jonathan Allen revenge game. Here we go. This could actually be a game that could be a Sunday night primetime type of
Yeah,
game. Vikings,
definitely.
good team. Commanders with a rising superstar quarterback. Yeah, I like this game. I'm going to give the Commanders the win here. I think Washington's going to be really good again. There's always going to be the questions about, can Jaden Daniels, is there going to be a little bit of a sophomore slump? Saw a little bit of that with CJ Stroud last year with the second year and people getting a little more film and tape on him. But I think Jaden Daniels is so talented that he's going to overcome some of those questions, and the Commanders are going to be really good again. So I'll give Washington the win at US Bank Stadium here.
Yeah, I think the Commanders go into this season with top 5 Super Bowl odds, and Daniels, I don't think there's a sophomore slump coming for a player with that
Mm-mm.
level of talent. I think this is more like even a blow up, even more than where he was at. Understandable to take an L there. Now the Vikings travel, and again, don't scrutinize whether this is how it's going to work or not. This might not be, but I think don't usually play the last 2 weeks against division opponents, and then there's another game in the middle of the season against a division opponent. It doesn't matter. It's a fake schedule with real opponents. So they're playing at the Lions at a 5-3 record. They go to Detroit.
I'll give the Lions this one. I gave the Vikings the win in week 1 at US Bank. I can't see the Vikings sweeping the Lions, considering where both teams are at right now. So I'll give Detroit the win here.
Okay. Next game on the list is, and I think that's totally fair. Next game on the list is at the Pittsburgh Steelers. And once again, who knows who their quarterback is, but it doesn't matter because it's not going to be good. But they do have a good defense. They do have a good coach, and it's not the easiest place to play. So does JJ McCarthy go to Pittsburgh and get a W?
I think this is actually a game that the Vikings can win if the Steelers have not really figured out what the hell they're doing at quarterback, which they right now they still have not. So I think this is a game that JJ McCarthy can go in and play really well, and the Vikings defense can play really well as well. And so I'll actually take the Vikings to win a tight one in Pittsburgh that might be a little sloppy, one of those snot-nosed kind of physical games. But I think with the way the Vikings have kind of built themselves now, they're built to kind of play that style of football now, hopefully with an improved running game and everything. So I'll give the Vikings to win in Pittsburgh. It's been a long
Okay.
time since they've won there.
Yeah. The only game I think that I've covered since I've covered the team was the 17 one where they tried to throw a pass with the punter.
Yeah, that was the Case's first start, 2017, right? The last time they won in Pittsburgh, I want to say, last time I remember them winning in Pittsburgh was the game where Bill Coward stuffed the photo into the referee's
Oh yeah,
pocket,
yeah.
running back to the locker room. That
Yes,
was
yes,
95. That was
yes,
30 years ago. So,
yes.
yeah, it's been a while.
Let's see, because wasn't one of the Favre losses at Pittsburgh. I want to say, yeah,
Oh
okay,
nine. Yep, that was in
okay. I
Pittsburgh. That was
thought
a
so,
loss. Yep.
but that one in 17 was funny because I thought the case was absolutely done, and like the team's not going to be any good, and they're gonna go 7-9 or whatever after that loss to the Steelers, and instead they go 13-3. So what we have right now, picking this fake schedule with real opponents, 6-3, as they will play the Bears for the first time, and this is going to be at US Bank Stadium.
I will call this a win. I think the Bears are going to be a better team. I think Ben Johnson's going to be a little bit more of a competent coach than his predecessor, than his two predecessors, really, last year. So, but I still think the Vikings are going to be a better team being at home. I think they'll take care of business against the Bears.
Okay. They will play the Ravens as their next opponent at home as a 7-3
Ooh.
football club. And I imagine Baltimore is going to be very good. And that will be JJ McCarthy against another really good quarterback. That is the theme here. This is why you had to go get Allen, Hargrave, bring back Harry.
Yeah.
Like, this is why you got to load up, and probably another corner still in the mix here. Maybe draft on defense. If you are playing some really good offenses here, including, I mean, even just Lions and Ravens and Commanders, a lot of good quarterbacks, but can they beat the Ravens at US Bank Stadium? I don't think Lamar has ever been here.
This will be his first trip to Minneapolis, yeah. And I'm going to give the Ravens the win here. I think the Ravens are going to be really good again. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the league. Once again, one of the best quarterbacks, one of the elite quarterbacks in this league, and they're going to be tough to handle. So I'll give Baltimore the win.
All right. On to at the Cleveland Browns is the next opponent. The Vikings, where are we at now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 4 going to Cleveland once again. Don't know who a quarterback is, but I know it's not going to be good. Actually, it could be Kirk. Sounds like it could be Kirk.
Wouldn't that be something? Kirk reunited with Kevin Stefanski. Wouldn't that be something? Yeah, the Browns are just not. I think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. I think that situation out there is just not good. And hey, they're giving more money to Myles Garrett. Congratulations to him. They're not trading him. They're just paying him more money. And he's gonna be somebody that obviously is gonna probably present some problems for the Vikings, but the Browns overall just not good. So I'll give the Vikings a win here.
Sorry if I said 7-3. I meant 7-5. Sorry about that. Thank you for the correction. Blind Shadow Vortex. I love you guys' names. So all right, winning against the Browns would then make them 8-5. And now I have them going out to face the Chargers. And I made this late in the season on purpose, so Vikings fans will come out to that game. The Chargers will be good, and it will be quite a foe there. And they haven't always had the best luck in that building against the LA teams. So do they get a win at LA to go to a 9-win team down the stretch, or do you think they lose to the Chargers here?
I think the Vikings will have a contingency of fans out there. Especially with it being the Chargers. I think your Chargers, I agree with you. I think the Chargers would be good. Harbaugh's a good coach. But I just still kind of wonder, like, they lost. I mean, Joey Bosa's off to Buffalo now, so that was a loss. They do bring back Khalil Mack on a 1-year deal, so he's going to be somebody they're going to have to monitor. But I'll give the Vikings the win. I think they'll have a pretty good group of fans out there, and they'll play well. In a pretty friendly environment, and they'll come away with the win.
So a 9-5 team going into the final 3 weeks of the season. And I'm just going to shout out Andrew for asking me what week I think the bye week will be. I didn't put 2 seconds of work into my fake schedule because it's fake. All I tried to do was just get the right opponents and then put the games against the Bears and Packers at the end. I didn't think about the bye. All right, Manny, next is the bye week. Like,
which one of these games will be played on Thursday night, Coller?
Yeah, I know. This one this is a Monday Night Football. It's part of a doubleheader, so it'll be the 8:50.
I just picked the Commanders game being a Sunday night game because it's going to be Jaden Daniels against JJ McCarthy. Like, that seems like it would be a pretty good Sunday night game, but I don't know when the hell these games are going to be.
Oh, apparently Blind Shadow Vortex is a band name. I mean, it sounds like a band name, but I also thought maybe you're just dark. Like, maybe that's just your thing. I don't know. I mean, if you're a Vikings fan, you're watching this, you could be a little twisted. I mean, if you're staying with over all the years. Anyway, 9-5, 3 games to go. Bengals at US Bank Stadium.
Ooh, man, the Vikings got some good quarterbacks coming into town next year.
Yes,
oh my gosh. Ooh. You're a season ticket holder. You are getting a treat in 2025. Yeah, Joe Burrow coming in. The Bengals are still trying to figure out. I mean, they're always going to be relevant because Burrow.
Yep.
But their defense wasn't good last year, and they haven't really done anything to
O-line.
O-line. They haven't improved that. So I will give the Vikings the win here. And I can't remember the last time. It's been a while since the Vikings have won in Cincinnati. I can't remember the last time the Bengals came into Minneapolis and won. I don't know if it's happened in my lifetime. And I'm 40.
Trying to think of how many games I've covered at US Bank Stadium with the Bengals. Probably just the one where they murdered them in 17.
The game that Teddy came back in late in the game. Yeah.
Yep. That was the one. Because the other times they've gone to Cincinnati, and there was the Brandon Powell tush push game. And also the Dalvin Cook didn't actually fumble, but they said he did.
Yeah.
And that 2021
2021.
set off the rocks tumbling down and
That was a
turning
season opener,
into,
wasn't it, in 21?
yeah, yep, turning
Week
into
1?
what the 1-4 start or whatever it was, and then Zimmer getting fired. If they win that game, then maybe it would have been different. KOC wouldn't be here and JJ McCarthy wouldn't be your quarterback, and who knows. Anyway, that's for a different summer podcast. So you've got them getting on a roll here late in the season. They now have 10 wins, 5 losses, and the final 2 games, Manny, will be at the Bears and at the Packers. So Soldier Field and Lambeau Field. How will the Vikings fare in this fake schedule with real opponents?
I will give them losses in both of those games because
Oh,
they're
late
road
season
games.
meltdown.
I
Oh
know.
no,
I
they
know.
are who we thought they were. Oh, they were fraud. I'm sorry. I'm getting ready for how this goes sometimes with
I
fans.
mean, I do think the Bears are gonna be better, and the Soldier Field thing is, I mean, the Vikings have won games there the last few years now, so it's not as much of a thing anymore at Soldier Field, but I think it kinda still is if the Bears are better, than what they've been the last couple of years,
They
so
almost blew it last year. I mean, that Bears
yeah,
team was completely melting down, and they came really close to
yeah.
screwing that up.
So if you're talking about week 17 in Chicago, so that's what, December, whatever the last Sunday in December is, probably. Yeah, that's a tough one. So I give the Vikings a loss there. And then Lambeau, kind of the same thing. Week 18, probably first Sunday or Monday for in January. Two tough places to play in week 17 and 18. So I'll call them both losses.
Okay. So you have the Vikings as a 10-win NFL team for next year, which would put them in the playoffs more likely than not. And I would say, let's just do this before you go, Manny. I kept you longer than expected, but we had breaking news, which was awesome, about
Mhm.
Harrison Smith coming back. And now it feels like we really know what the Vikings are for next year as a roster. If they win 10 games, go into the playoffs with this schedule and a young quarterback, how do you feel? You guys are funny. When's the winter whiteout? What game? That's funny. That's funny. Will they play on Thanksgiving? Love all that. Love all that. We didn't pick the preseason. We should have picked who. Let's pick the joint practices, Manny. Let's pick the joint practice. Who are they going to joint practice?
I'll
Let's
guess
pick
the
the
Bengals game. I'll guess the Bengals game will be the whiteout game.
locations around the world that the Vikings are going to play. Let's pick the locations around the world that the Vikings are going to play. I'll go with Berlin, and you can go with Sydney, Australia. Okay, let's stop it. Let's
Let's
just.
pick the broadcast teams. Let's pick the broadcast teams for each game.
All right. Last thing of the night for you, Manny. Great stuff. And thank you so much for taking extra time. I kind of held you hostage, by the way.
It's
Anyway,
all
I was
good.
like, you're staying.
I love
So
it.
I'll buy you a hot dog at a Lynx game this summer. So what would we think of that?
I'd be cool with that. I mean, I think if you're going now, maybe some expectations are higher because of what they've done in free agency, getting all the veterans
I'm
in,
sorry. The flex. Someone's saying the flex.
get the
Flexing.
flex games
How
on the
much is
schedule.
flex?
I know.
Which
I saw it
pants
too.
are
It
they
was great.
wearing on the road, Manny?
Oh my gosh, so good. I love it.
I'm sorry.
Um,
Now go ahead.
no,
Thailand is a great answer.
I think 10 and 7 would be good. I think considering the schedule, I know there's going to be, coming off a 14-win season and everything they've done in free agency, there's going to be a thought that this team should be very good and be competitive. But it's going to be a tougher schedule. They're going to have some great quarterbacks that they're going to have to face off against this year, and it's just going to make things challenging. So I think if you can get through that schedule with like 10 or 11 wins, I think that's a good positive sign. And you're getting into the playoffs and you're getting JJ McCarthy playoff experience. I don't think I don't think you can be disappointed with that. It would be nice for them to, if they do get in, maybe win a game or two, go on a run. That'd be cool. But I think just getting to the playoffs with the first year with McCarthy, I think would be a huge
So
accomplishment.
what are the seed tiebreakers going to be? That's my question. I agree, Manny. With this schedule, 10 wins or 11 might be like 14 for last year.
Yeah.
And I actually think that you can go into the playoffs as a stronger team than you were last year, even if you don't have, well, they might have the same seed, but even if you don't have as good of a regular season record, you could go in with a stronger team overall. And if they get to that point and they're in the playoffs and they've won that many games with JJ McCarthy, you're going to feel really good about where he is going forward. So, okay, Manny, I'm sure you have something to do with your life. So I'll let you go, but great stuff. Love having the breaking news with you. Our Aaron Rodgers conversation was earlier. If you want to go back in the video and watch what we had to say about Aaron Rodgers, but I appreciate you jumping in, Manny. A very exciting time for Vikings fans. So we will talk soon. The next time that we really need to pick the schedule will be the next time that we talk on the show. So thank you for your time, sir.
You got it. Always a pleasure. Football.
Don't worry. I pay Manny. He's fine. Okay. One more thing before I wrap up here. I've seen maybe 15 of you ask about a trade with Jordan Addison and Sauce Gardner. Can someone explain to me before I go for the evening where this came from? Is this a random person making up a trade that they like, or was this some report that I missed? I mean, in general, my rule of thumb is that I work off of the reporters that we know to be solid with stuff like that, as opposed to just, hey, this random person, this person, that, I definitely agree with Dusty with the NBA style seeding. The Vikings should not have been a 4 seed last year. I'm just saying they should not have been. And the NFL didn't change the rule though. So is it just, okay, it's just people making up stuff. Okay. Gotcha. All right. No big deal then. That's fine. People can have fun with made up trade stuff. So that's it. Anyway, okay. That's all I needed to know. I got nothing else. So great stuff tonight. Breaking news. Aaron Rodgers stuff that we tried our best to move on from and all that sort of stuff. It was really fun. And I think there's a lot more to come for the Vikings. I think there's more signings to come. And if there are, then you'll have emergency podcasts. Again, I got nothing on the schedule. The Vikings will be doing some press conferences with these guys virtually. So I'll be on those, as I always am, and be able to report back on those. And maybe we'll, go through some of the things that those guys said and stuff like that. But if there's any kind of breaking news, that I'll be here for you guys. And purpleinsider.football, go check it out. It'll have my updated depth chart for the Vikings with the biggest questions, best available free agents. That's what I'm working on right now, and a reaction to Harrison Smith coming back. So again, purpleinsider.football, check out the newsletter, and we will catch you guys later. Thank you so much, everybody. Great stuff. Football.